Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Shatter the Script podcast, as well as the Stats and Scars podcast. We are going to collab it all into one mega episode, and a happy holiday week for you guys. If you are celebrating Thanksgiving with your family, please name your favorite side dish in the comments, essentially. So we got a fun week. If you're going hunting, send us pictures, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a fun week. We wanted to combine it all into one episode and kind of get everything out there on the table so that everybody can enjoy the rest of their week and maybe get that episode in on Wednesday. So with that being said, we got a large amount of topics. If you are a first-time listener, you can follow us at Shatter the Script on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Or if you want to find us, our video content, you can find us on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter using the same handle at Shatter the Script on all platforms. Okay, so first, a little outline of the episode, and then I'm going to kind of incorporate our contributors later on in the episode. But we're going to start with the 12th Men segment because I believe that it's going to be the most relevant topic this week as Rivalry Week, that's hard to say, Rivalry Week comes into play. Auburn and Alabama, Texas and Texas A&M, Michigan and Ohio State, all these great rivalries. So we're going to be covering that, my top 12 teams, my first four out, TLC references and whatnot, get some predictions within that. We'll move into some injuries from injury analysis from the medical guy. He'll be joining the show, as well as the analyst with his stat analysis. We're also going to be doing our Shatter the Script topic, of course, the Texas versus Texas A&M game this weekend, the history behind that and whatnot. Our NFL MVP through November, as well as our Thanksgiving game predictions for NFL. So all of that's going to be on this episode, so stay along for the ride. The contributors will be here in just a few minutes. But to get started, I'm going to hammer it off with the 12th Men segment. If you know how this goes, you can remember that my top four teams has kind of remained the same. Let's start from 12 and work our way down. At number 12, I've got 9-2 Clemson. They're 7-1 in the ACC. They had that rough loss to a team a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember who it was, but it was by 2 or 3 scores or whatnot. But Clemson has, honestly, since outside of the Georgia game and their previous game, or their second loss, it's just one of those things where they've shown they've been pretty consistent. We kind of know what team that they are. I like them at 12. They have a big game this weekend against my number 11 team who snuck their way in there. I just think they're playing one of the best SEC ball right now, and probably the team that nobody wants to play. Sorry, Clemson is number 11 on my list. South Carolina sitting at 8-3. And 8-3, South Carolina, 5-3 in the SEC. I still feel like they're the most dangerous team right now to play. Lenore Sellers is playing out of his mind. Sanders is running back, having a great time. If you look through their schedule, they've had a very battle-hardened schedule. I don't think they're going to sneak into the college football playoffs, but just as an outlook over my top 12 teams, I am really liking South Carolina. So keep an eye on that matchup. We'll be predicting that here in a little bit. Number 18, South Carolina at number 17, Clemson. Number 10, Indiana. Indiana lost their game in the rain and cold in Ohio State. They fall to 10-1. Did we all expect this? Yes, we did. I mean, no one is really that surprised at Indiana, who hasn't played a single ranked team all year, went into Ohio State, who's played 3 or 4 top 10 teams this year, and gets smoked. And not only that, Indiana just isn't one of those powerhouse organizations. They're having a great year. Do they deserve to be in the college football playoff? I would say so. I would argue so. I think you give them a shot, especially that the SEC has kind of lost the benefit of the doubt this past weekend. So, number 9, SMU, former a little local team. We got 10-1, 7-0 in the ACC, clinches the ACC championship, according to sources. So they are kind of a surprise team that really skipped the beat in my rankings. They were in that first 4 out last week. Now they are inside the top 10. Penn State, man, I could put them outside the top 12. I just can't decide who outside of that would replace them. So I have them at 8. I really dislike the way they're playing. It is very tough to win on the road in college football. We all understand that. We saw it last week in the SEC. But Penn State, number 8, 10-1, near loss to Minnesota this past weekend, 26-25. They remain inside my list. Then we'll go into Miami at number 7. They're just kind of like, we know what team that they are. At this point of the season, we understand Miami at 10-1. They'll get into shootouts, a lot like Ole Miss, but they'll win the shootouts. And you can count on Cam Ward to be very, very consistent throwing the football. Martinez in the backfield. This is a great football team. It might be a little bit overhyped. Are they a national championship contender? My opinion says no, but we're all open to surprises in college football. Number 6, Notre Dame. Notre Dame, actually, I saw a tweet, has played the most ranked opponents this year, when we all thought the schedule was going to be, just shattered glass, essentially. And am I a fan of Notre Dame? Their offense has improved each week. They've beaten our troops twice. I think that's evil. But, at the same time, they have one of the best secondaries in college football. We've said that from week 1. And you heard Kirk Herbstreit say it and Kyle Field. And ever since then, they've been a pretty consistent team. If you haven't noticed, my top 12 are just essentially teams who we know who they are. We understand what kind of team they are, and that's how I formulated this top 12. And my top 5 have been the same since the first week I started this. Essentially, I'm putting in Tennessee at 9-2, 5-2 in the SEC. They will be out of the SEC championship, but I think they'll get a spot in the playoff. And, of course, my top 4. Oregon, number 1. Number 2, Ohio State, who just beat Indiana at home, who plays Michigan this weekend. Number 3, Georgia, who clinched an SEC championship spot. And number 4, argue with the wall, but I guess I'm going to put number 4 at Texas, 10-1, 6-1 in the SEC. They play A&M this weekend. So now let's invite the contributors in here, and I'll let them get kind of settled with their mics and whatnot. But welcome to the show, the analyst and the medical guy. How are you boys doing today? The medical guy, welcome back.
What's up, guys? Yeah, doing good. Just as expected, just tired.
Yeah.
Off IR.
Yeah.
The good news is, I was going to say, that was exactly what I was going with it. Off IR, and the analyst back for another week of stats and scars. I think we had some good production, but today we're going to get some great production out of the contributors. But yeah, so I wanted to incorporate our winners and losers into this 12th men segment because a lot happened last week. There was a lot of upsets, especially in the SEC and in the Big 12. Big 12 had a lot of BYU and Arizona State, Colorado and Kansas. So out of those two, I'll start with medical guys. Since you've been absent for so long, I have to give you first tabs on this. Who are your winners from last week?
Well, my 2 winners, I guess you could do 3, but I'm going to go with 2 right now. Yep. SMU Ponies. Okay, I know their strength of schedule may not be the best and whatnot, but when they play anybody their one loss was to BYU, who was very good for a long time and has kind of fallen off the last couple games, but when they've played lesser opponents, they haven't been close, and they've just kind of rolled all those. So SMU, obviously being from Texas, being a little more biased to the Texas teams and whatnot. So SMU is going to be my one winner, and then my other winner, to be honest, is going to be Ohio State. I mean, I know how we feel about Big Ten and whatever, and there was a lot of hype going into that Indiana game with them being number 5 or whatever they were, and Ohio State went in and started off a little rocky because Indiana drove down the field and took up 8 minutes of the clock or something. And then it was Ohio State was oh, they can play football, so can we. And then proceeded to stomp, Indiana. And I know there were 15 points scored, but really it was 7 in the first drive of the first quarter. And then I don't think they scored again until, the last 6 minutes of the fourth quarter. So I was really impressed with them. And it showed that, even if they're not the greatest opponent, it showed that Ryan Day could win a big game. And that's kind of been his downfall since he's been at Ohio State, is just winning that big game late in the season, whether it be Michigan or Oregon or whatever, a college football playoff team. It's always been that one game towards the end of the year that just has tainted his legacy over there at Ohio State. So those are my 2 winners.
Yeah, I like those a lot, especially, an underrated one, like you said, Ohio State. I mean, they were at home. They had unfavorable weather conditions, and they took advantage of it and did what they were supposed to do against what everybody thought Indiana was. The complaints about Indiana, they kind of exploited that. And they went into Penn State earlier in the year, got the dub pretty comfortably there, and they've been consistent all year. And, once again, they have great receivers. Will Howard's kind of stepped up, and like you said, Ryan Day. So, yeah, and SMU, like I said, they snuck into my top 12. Yeah, I like those winners. Ryan, the analyst, what do you got for your winners from past weekend?
Well, Jacob took one of mine at SMU.
Great.
I think that was a big one, but I actually have Florida on here. Everyone was on Billy Napier's ass about how bad this team was, like in week 3, but they've really kind of turned it around. If you watch them, the last couple of games they've looked pretty decent on the field. I think that's finally because they decided to go with DJ Lagway, Willis native, as at quarterback. I mean, if you look at the last couple of games, they lost to Georgia. They barely lost to Tennessee. They got beat down by Texas, but their last 2 wins are against LSU at 27-16, and then Ole Miss they beat by 7 this past weekend. I think you can expect to see Billy Napier still on the sidelines next year for Florida. You can tell that he's kind of moved the ship in the right direction there. So it looks like another team than like when A&M played them in like week 3. They just like completely discombobulated. I had SMU as well to all the points that Jacob just said, and then Florida. Yeah,
Florida's a great one. And another interesting point with Florida is, and I'll take the Paul Feinbaum approach, which that dude, you talk about, you mentioned before the pod, medical guy, you said like old guy yelling at cloud. I mean, he's basically the college football representative of old guy yelling at cloud. And he was talking about, he's always had this beef with Lane Kiffin, and Lane Kiffin was rumored to maybe want to go to Florida and coach over there. And the guy who, Napier, who's over there right now, goes and beats Ole Miss in their latest matchup. And it's like, it's just kind of, the irony is funny when you look at it from that perspective. And, like to your point, Ryan, like DJ Lagway is probably a much more viable option than 60-year Graham Mertz.
Yeah.
Their other guy who just hasn't really been up to par all year. I never understood that. If you got a project like DJ Lagway, dude, I'm playing him. That throw that he made out of the pocket, I don't know if you guys saw it. He, kind of ducked and dodged the guy in the pocket and threw it sidearm to the corner. I mean, the dude's got outrageous talent.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Cam Newton's build, looking at him.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
He's huge.
Yeah. So, okay, yeah. And then I'll go to some of my winners from this past weekend. I'm going to have to go Oklahoma. Oklahoma just absolutely spoiled Alabama's chances of any type of playoff appearance, of course the SEC championship appearance, and it kind of completely shattered the script on all of my takes from Alabama over the past. I mean, I've kind of been protecting them over the past 3 or 4 weeks, and I want to admit blindly, because Jalen Milroe, it kind of has, every game has depended on his play. Yeah. And when he's playing great, they're unbeatable. When he's playing average, they're beatable. Like we saw at Tennessee, when he plays like ass, it's over. I mean,
I think that's not only on Milroe, though. I think that's more indictment on the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milroe has plenty of talent. It's like you can't just rely on, quarterback starts playing bad, we lose. It's more than that. Anyway.
Yeah,
I have more on that here in a second.
Okay. I was going to go into it, but I feel like we're on the same wavelength right there with where you're going with that.
Yeah.
I agree. And they have a chance. The scary part about Alabama is there's a chance they go 8-4 going into a hot Auburn environment, rivalry game. They just come off a big four-time overtime win versus Texas A&M, which I guess – my other winner of the week is I'll go to the Big 12, and I'll kind of do a half and half, and that is Arizona State, who their fans just absolutely crucified me on Twitter when I asked why they were rushing the field. And there's like a ranked team beating another ranked team, and we're rushing the field, and too early to add to that. And outside of that, you're like, oh, it was our biggest win in like a decade. I was like, oh. Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. I mean, I guess they did lose. I believe Jaden Daniels was there before he transferred to LSU, and big win for them.
Yeah.
And IU, and they love their coach. So great win for Arizona State.
Good for them.
They're in the contention for Big 12 championship, tiebreaker over BYU, and then Kansas was my other winner, upsetting Colorado.
Yeah.
So
Kansas is like. You watch that team. I was sitting there watching it with my brother-in-law, and like Kansas is like I think they're 5-6 now.
Yeah.
You watch that team, you're like, how in the world are they 5-6? They have so much talent on that team. That quarterback, I can't remember. It's something Daniels. He's
Jalen Daniels.
Is it
Yeah,
Jalen?
Jalen.
I couldn't remember if it was Jaden, like Jaden Daniels, but that dude's a baller. So
Yeah, their running back is.
their running back is also
Neal?
a bother.
I don't know if it's Kevin Neal or I don't
Yeah.
want to say his
Yeah, Devin
first name.
Neal.
Devin.
I
Neal.
will say this: if you're looking for an ultra fun,
Y'all are
sleepy
close.
team to use in college football, the video game, use Kansas. Their team
Oh,
is
yeah.
unbelievable.
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So let's move into our losers of the week, and I'll actually start with the analyst this time, then move to the medical guy. Who are your losers from this past week?
Yeah, we'll stay in the Big 12. I had literally the Big 12 as a whole. Colorado losing. Jared just covered BYU, and Iowa State being out of the hunt too. You know, their season took a major dip about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This conference is just really weak now. You know, if you're going to put anybody up there, whoever gets in the Big 12, like gets in from the Big 12 to the college football playoff, I just don't see them making a major impact in the playoff. You know, if they play any of the SEC teams, I really feel like you know, A&M could roll BYU.
Yeah.
Bama, or not Bama now, but Texas could roll BYU. Colorado, I just don't think has the talent to keep up with any of the SEC teams, maybe even Ohio State or an Oregon. So I had, you know, the Big 12 have just kind of lost a grip and a hold on their conference. And I think, you know, you're kind of seeing the result of UT and OU, you know, packing bags and leaving for the SEC. You're seeing a result of that big time in the Big 12. So I don't know if y'all have any comments on that. But the other one I was going to get into was I'll wait, but y'all got any comments on the Big 12?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. I've been preaching about it all year, especially with we'll get into it in a second with the TLC, you know, other guys' references, my first four out. A lot of the I don't want no scrubs have been kind of an off-put between Ohio State and BYU just because I watch some of their games and I'm like, there's just no way I can see these teams in the playoff competing with, like, I think a good matchup, if they pulled a good matchup and one of them made the college football playoff, I'm assuming the winner of the Big 12 championship would be
They're
like
an
Miami.
automatic qualifier.
Like Miami or an ACC champ, like SMU or Miami, I guess. One of those teams would be a good pull. Notre Dame might be a good pull to have like a good game with them. But if they pulled, you know, a top SEC team or, you know, somebody like them snuck in, I just have zero confidence that they would contend.
Yeah.
The medical guy. Or Ryan, do you have any final comments? Sorry.
Well, I think this is probably going to roll right into what Jacob's about to say. I also have Bama and Ole Miss on here. You know, Bama losing to a really bad OU team. This is what I was talking about earlier. You know, Milroe also bounced himself out of any Heisman votes. I feel like he was kind of like a low-tier favorite, probably like your third or fourth vote behind Cam Ward, Ashton Jeanty, and
Along with Jackson Dart.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I have for Ole Miss in my notes. It's a very similar story, but I think Ole Miss was more expected. Bama was not. And going back to what we were talking about with Bama, and then I'll let Jacob give his 2 cents, but I just think that the culture has kind of changed a lot, and I think the underlining factor here too is like I would like to see how many people left because Saban, you know, retired. And I just think that the culture there has kind of changed a little bit, and it's been kind of evident in these games where you see, like, you know, receivers doing the whole, like, free throw gesture they did and they didn't get the fourth down, or they've had, like, culture issues where, you know, players are doing stuff that they didn't do with Saban, and I think that does change a lot, especially being, you know, Bama, who's been the rock of college football for the last 10 years, so... For Ole Miss, though, I think it's the same story we've been preaching. Just, I don't think that team is as good as everybody gives it credit for. But I'll let Jacob go.
Yeah, so my two losers, first one being Boise State. And so I know they won, but they won by 3 points to Wyoming. And so that's where I think there should be a separation between SMU and Boise State, is that when SMU plays those lower echelon teams or teams that aren't as good as them, they take care of business. And they win and they cover their spread, whether it be, 10, 15, 20 points. SMU does that where Boise State, it just doesn't seem like they have it. And like they might get into the playoffs and whatnot. And it's kind of like the same thing with the Big 12 and whatnot. Is like I just don't see them competing very far. And I think that's where it'll show the complete separation of talent. And so that was mine, was Boise State. And then where was my other one?
Yeah, Boise State's a good one.
My other loser were our armed forces teams. We were so high on them all year, and they are a lot better than what they have been in the past. And I've been riding those teams, hoping they would just do something crazy, and then get down to the end of it, and then it's like, well, if we've got a 12-0 Army or Navy team, and they ended up beating Notre Dame and whatnot, they could get in, and then sadly they let us down. So that was just disappointing, and to see how it went, it was just ass kickings both games. So that would have to be my other losers, are our two armed forces teams that gave us a little bit of hope, and now it's gone.
Eventually, you're gonna have to throw the football as much as it's fun to watch the triple option. So
yes.
Yeah. And I watched a bit of that Notre Dame Army game, and I'm just sitting there. One, I'm just clenching my fist because I'm like, Notre Dame, the Catholic Church, how could you do this? And Army, like the same thing. Like they demoralized Navy earlier in the season. You're like, oh man, like we had a shot, and Navy had a chance to prove themselves, and then all this hype. They're interviewing the quarterback before that Navy game, and then just go out there and get beat like 56-7. And then the Army, the same thing. I turned that game off in 10 minutes.
Yeah,
like I was like, oh, let's see what happens here, and just instant 21-0. I was like, yeah, sorry, Yeah, I like those. My one comment with Boise State, because I'll add them into my loser category as well, is they're so dependent on Ashton Genty, and which is fine. I mean, he's having one of the best, if not the best, running back season that we've seen in a long time, since we've had some other running back Heismans. He's had a better
at least
season
since we've been alive. The only one that would be close to that is Barry Sanders. So
Derrick Henry, they put his numbers up, and I'm like, well, he's totally surpassed Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
But my argument, over the past 2 or 3 weeks with Boise State, they've kind of been in that first four out, maybe at number 12 category, in that 12th man, is that with the leading Heisman candidate, I don't know if the committee wants Ashton Genty out of the playoffs. I feel like they want more eyes on him. So I don't know. That might be wrong on that, but I just think it'd be disappointing to be like, oh, here's our Heisman, and they have the record to be in the college football playoff. We're not going to put him in. I just don't know. Like, as a human being, I'm thinking about that, and I'm going, I don't know how, like, if they move away from the human element of the commission and say, okay, I want Ashton Genty in because he's the top Heisman candidate. I think we've got to have, it would increase our viewership, we get more money, but the football perspective says what Jacob says, is that I don't think Boise State is actually, it should really be in there as like a true top 12 team. Because
Wyoming is a 2-9 team. They're not like a 9 and like a 8-1, FCS borderline FBS team. Like they're not very good this year. So that was the other part of it.
Yep. My other loser was Colorado. Colorado just going in there, and granted, that hit on Shadur Sanders was filthy as shit. I mean, there's no place for that. I mean, I was watching it, and like over time, Colorado's had this huge spotlight on them, obviously, and I've been heavily critical of their team, not Shadur and Travis Hunter, but their team is just so independently branded on those two players, and they've got some contributors to that too, but it's just like, outside of that, their team is just not that great. I mean, really, if we're thinking about it in retrospect, they were saved by a Hail Mary against Baylor.
Yeah.
And that kind of propelled them. So if they had lost this game and had lost the game to Baylor, they wouldn't be even in the talks for a Big 12 championship. But They are still in contention for. I don't know if they'll be able to get in, but
No.
yeah, Colorado just kind of disappointing. But at the same time, a lot like a lot of other teams such as A&M and Ole Miss they played a lot. There were so many trap games last week in college football.
Yeah,
so many, and to where it was like, oh well. Don't sleep on going to this place to play because don't sleep on Kansas. Don't sleep on Auburn. Auburn's a tough place to play. Nick Saban said it. Florida can't go to the Swamp and expect to just roll over them. And so very exciting week of college football. Those are our winners and losers. Any other statements before we move on into the TLC references?
I think you got to highlight A&M a little bit. I
Yeah.
had them as a loser too. They had every chance to win that game.
I was hiding.
And capitalize on that. You have the Auburn punter shank 2 punts. You're in positive territory twice. Can't make anything happen there. You get an interception in positive territory again. You come out, I think, with a total of 9 points, maybe even 6 on that. And then to close out the game, your quarterback's fumbling a football, and you have to punt, giving Auburn another chance. It was just kind of disappointing to watch. On top of that, Marcel Reed is a big question mark. He's a freshman. I think there is a lot of room for improvement, and I think he can be good. But right now, I just don't think he's going to put you in the position to, win you big games right now. I think the whole thought process was to have Weigman be the guy and then Reed come in next year. But obviously, that went to hell in a handbasket in, week 2. So, I was just going to quickly highlight how A&M and Jared's over there in pain, but quickly how A&M could have easily won that game multiple times and never could capitalize.
Yeah. And I'll get into it, more later once we introduce the Shatter the Script segment with Texas and Texas A&M because I wanted to – that was kind of going to be my angle at what's going to happen in that game.
Yeah.
But, yeah, absolutely.
I feel like if you're going to talk losers in college football, you have to at least somewhat mention them a little bit.
Because you're 100% right. Nothing makes me more upset in football to when you get plus territory to start a drive, whether it be from an interception or a shanked punt or a fumbled recovery, and you go backwards. Or you end up with 3. It's like it drives me up because then the turnover doesn't mean anything, as we saw. So plenty of opportunities. I would say they probably had 8 opportunities to win that game and just didn't capitalize. And me sitting in front of my TV with multiple Coors Lights down on that coffee table, the neighbors were knocking. I'll tell you that. They're like, oh, "What is going on over there?"
I had to take.
I unplugged the Christmas lights. I was so mad.
Marvin's Room just playing for the rest of the night.
Nobody's home. All right. I wish I had TLC background music. This would be funny. But, as you guys have seen over the past couple of weeks, I've incorporated this kind of a fun TLC reference from the other guys. Ain't Too Proud to Beg. The Analyst will be taking over that team for the Ain't Too Proud to Beg. Jacob will do the Gotta Creep. Who's going to creep into that top 12 spot, maybe into the playoffs. My Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls, and I Don't Want No Scrubs. So let's start with the Analyst. Who is your Ain't Too Proud to Beg?
Yeah, my Ain't Too Proud to Beg is basically your surprising contenders, and I think I've already kind of highlighted these guys, and we've talked about them a little bit already on the pod, but I've got SMU and Clemson, and the reason I put SMU in there is their resume, like Jacob has said, has not been wow effect, but their play style really makes it look like they have a good chance of being in the playoffs. They switched QBs earlier in the year. Preston Stone was having a lot of issues, and they switched to that guy, KJ Jennings, and they never really looked back. And, their schedule has looked – they've beaten the crap out of teams. They're scoring close to 35 points a game, and it's really nice to see that. So, it is shaping up for them to play either Miami or Clemson in the ACC championship, which I really think will be a good game either way, and that will be a good chance for SMU to kind of sign – their last little, script about, hey, we deserve to be there, especially, if they win. I think you have to put them in there, especially if they beat Miami, if it is Miami. But Clemson, on the other hand, I feel like they got whipped by Georgia in week 1, and everybody just kind of forgot about them. And they've just been they've had a pretty sleepy good year otherwise, with their only other loss being to Louisville, which could hurt them. But I think whoever comes out Hopefully one of those teams, Clemson or SMU, gets in. Those are kind of the two teams that I don't think you would want to see if you're in the playoffs. I don't think, like, if you're a Big Ten team, if you're Ohio State, or if you're, God forbid, Penn State gets in, even though I think they're scrubs. I think that SMU or Clemson could give them a fight. That's kind of like the two frisky teams that I see that are hanging on the outside of the 12 or in the hunt, whatever you want to call it. But, I think that they have a good shot of making it, especially with like Ole Miss falling out of the picture and Bama falling out of the picture. These are the two teams that I could see rising, and Clemson has to win out, but SMU has a good chance of pushing their resume forward and being that last team to make it into the playoff.
Yeah, I would like to see SMU and Miami play one another. I think that would be a fun matchup.
I do too. I think that would be a high scoring game too. Whatever the over was, I would take it.
Yeah.
All right, the analysts got to creep.
The thing is there's so many like teams flying under the radar. I mean, a lot of them that we've mentioned. One big one that I think just kind of gets forgotten. Obviously, Clemson was mentioned, but I won't go into that. But the two that I see that don't get mentioned that are probably going to make it regardless are Notre Dame and unfortunately Penn State. They just keep beating the teams that are in front of them. To me, it's still wild to me that Notre Dame is still ranked as high as they are, considering their one loss this year. But it was to who that one loss was and what that team has done since then, which has been nothing. And so that's one of them. A couple others that, a lot of things have to go right, obviously. Is South Carolina, which is wild that they're there. In the AP poll or whatever they have right now, they have them at 14.
18. Actually, I think they might have went up. Never mind.
I'm just talking about the AP poll. The other one hasn't come out yet or whatever. But I mean, South Carolina, their strength of schedule has been number 12. The remaining strength of schedule is still number 18. And so they've got good wins. They've played hard teams and whatnot. And so obviously a lot of things have to go right. Am I saying that a 2-loss South Carolina team should get in before maybe an Alabama or whatever? No. But at the same time, we've seen that Alabama, they can lay eggs, it seems like, because that loss to Oklahoma, like Oklahoma's offense is terrible. And so that was just brutal. I mean, obviously you got your Boise State. I think BYU's out of the last 2 weeks. And then, funny enough, Arizona State and then Iowa State have kind of creep back in. And Arizona State, I mean, their coach is he's kind of a very interesting, a peculiar individual. But, I mean, his team plays hard for him. And obviously he's got the backing of all the fans and the program. Because every time they win a game, they tear the goalposts down. And then apparently they like to end games prematurely because that is either the second or third time that, they've been doing like coaches interviews and then all of a sudden they got to put a second back on the clock. So those are your other couple teams that are just kind of flying under the radar. And then obviously your ones that these might be, the ones you don't want in there, obviously. But, Indiana, I know nobody likes that and whatever, but, I mean, they lost to Ohio State. It's not like they lost to Iowa. Right. And so, like we said, it was a shitty environment. It was their first kind of big game in that house since they've gotten there. And so I don't think, fortunate enough for them, that's a bad loss, but a good loss. Because, I mean, that's arguably the number 2 team in the nation. And the last one I'll go into is Miami. Miami lost a stinker of a game earlier, and I can't remember who it was to, but it was like a freaking 41-39 loss to a team that, they shouldn't have lost to and whatnot. But since then, I mean, like we said, you got to play the games in front of you, and they've won them, and they're putting up points, and they're doing what everybody wants to see in college football, which is score points. And so those are kind of my, I guess, under the radar, kind of creeping into the playoffs and whatnot. I know there's a lot of teams there, but with how many teams have lost 2 or 3 games, I mean, you've got 10 teams that could, arguably if the dominoes fall, they could end up in that top 12. Personally, I would not like to see Alabama in it. I think they're, kind of the most, inconsistent team so far, even though they do have some close games and some wins, but it's just like when they have bad games, it's terrible. And kind of like y'all said, it's, if Jalen Milroe, it's do or die with him. Nothing else. And I really want to talk about this, but I know Ryan's going to mention it later, so I won't go into it. But those are kind of my teams that I think are kind of under the radar and could creep in.
Yeah. I think you're right, and that kind of transitions perfectly into don't go chasing waterfalls, and that's Alabama. To me, that win versus Georgia really set the tone for me protecting them for the rest of the season, and it was kind of a staple. Like, oh my gosh, if Jalen Milroe plays like this, 80% of the schedule, then they're going to be 10-1, essentially, and it just didn't happen. And they're so hot and cold all the time. You never know if a defensive player is gonna act out of character. Like as the analyst mentioned earlier, that locker room, just that culture isn't really the same since Saban left. You had people depart and go to other colleges, such as Isaiah Bond transferring from Alabama to Texas. With those losses, Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, I just don't see it like a deserving placement in the college football playoff for Alabama. And you look at a team like South Carolina, who I had in my top 12, is that their loss. The only time they've really just been bodied is Ole Miss earlier in the season. I think it was like 34-7, and they were screwed out of a win with LSU. I've mentioned that time and time before. They beat the crap out of Texas A&M at home. They beat Vanderbilt, which is a sleeper team. If they go in and beat Clemson, I think they have a strong argument. But with Alabama, those losses, they're just unacceptable for the talent on that team and for the prestigious amount of repertoire, I guess, that Alabama has carried in the SEC over the years. Then again, a win like that for Oklahoma gets some good recruits. But yeah, don't go chasing waterfalls, Alabama. And then my last one, I don't want no scrubs. And I know the medical guy spoke a little bit highly of these teams, but Arizona State and BYU, I can't see them in the college football playoff going, yeah, we're going to beat whoever's in front of us. I've watched BYU. The greatest game I've seen them play is against Kansas State in like the demon hours, essentially, like late at night. And they found themselves. They should have lost to Utah. They got a really strange but favorable call late in that game. Arizona State, they kind of fell off the wagon and then hopped back onto the wagon, repaired the wheels. So they're kind of in that. They kind of categorize in the I don't want no scrubs and also got a creep. But those two teams, to me, like, I'm sorry, like I don't want to see them in. I don't see they don't have an exciting factor to them, in my opinion. I don't see a spark. Those are fun teams that are going to play a fun bowl game, in my opinion.
Yeah. To go into like the resumes of all these teams that we kind of mentioned in that last three is like, anything kind of under 40, like you can give it a little bit of wiggle room of strength of schedule. But I mean, Miami 59 strength of schedule, Indiana 51. I mean, SMU 77, but we kind of talked about that. Notre Dame 78, Boise State 81, BYU 39. So it's kind of on the cusp. Arizona State 66, Iowa State 69. Nice. Clemson 57. Nice. But then you look at the SEC teams, it's like Georgia 1, Texas 36, which I think is the worst SEC team. Tennessee 22, Alabama 11, South Carolina 12, A&M 23, Ole Miss 27. So it just kind of like, I mean, do you want to see like the best teams play, or do you want to see the higher ranked teams play? And so you just kind of fall in that weird little window to where, everybody's going to complain if we have 12 teams or 4 teams in this thing. So It's just whatever you want to see.
That's the point I was going to attack, especially.
Oh, sorry, Jared.
No, you're good. You kind of cut out there. I thought you were done. That's kind of the point I wanted to see with this. It's like with 4 teams, it's like, oh, what about Florida State? And then like with 12 teams, it's like, oh, what about these 8 teams that are in the top 20? And you're like, all right, guys, everybody, calm down, everybody. So, it'll work itself out. And there's 2 games. Like you've got 2 factors, I think, and that is your strength of win in the final week, and then whoever wins your conference championship. And that'll solidify a lot, and we'll get a lot of answers from that. So, with all that being said, let's kind of get into some NFL action. We're going to transition into the injury analysis along with the DB list. The return of the DB list, the DB list king, as we might add. But yeah, I'll let you go ahead and roll with it for your injuries list.
All right, so we'll go into injuries, and towards the later end of the season, we're going to keep them very fantasy football based outside of a couple. So we'll start it off. David Montgomery, questionable with a shoulder injury. I'm assuming it's some type of AC joint sprain. He was removed from the game against the Lions. Obviously, they didn't miss a beat because they have 2 RB1s that play running back. Ryan, did we end up on the DB list?
He's good.
Oh, okay. Romeo Dubs, or Dubes, however you want to say it, he's questionable with concussion. Maybe that'll work out to where they will throw Jaden Reed the ball more after the first quarter going forward with things. Next, Josh Downs, questionable shoulder. In the report, it said he's week to week, so that's a big weapon. That's a big weapon for the Colts. That's down. Next, Trevor Lawrence, questionable with the ankle. He is practicing this week, so for that brutal Jaguars team, maybe they could have a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel and maybe a little bit of offensive production. Next, Isaiah Pacheco had that fibular fracture early in the year. He's supposed to be he came off IR and he's in that window. They are predicting he may play this week. However, I will go ahead and tell you, I would suggest maybe not to start him because they've got a lot of good production out of Kareem Hunt. They're 10-1 or whatever. There's really no reason to just throw him back in there and then bell cow it. Next, we saw Gardner Minshew, had that fractured clavicle / collarbone. He's going to be out for the remainder of the year. And then Aiden O'Connell had a thumb thing, and so they're saying he should play this week, but who knows? So probably don't put anybody on the Raiders on your fantasy team. Next, last night's game, J.K. Dobbins with a knee injury, questionable. It didn't look like it was too crazy serious last night because they did give him a brace, had him try out some stuff on the sideline, then ultimately, took him out. Could have been something kind of contused up or whatever. He's still questionable, and I haven't seen any reports come out about an actual, injury or diagnosis. So just keep an eye out on that. If you, want to go get Gus Edwards, he was running the ball a little bit, but you could see that offense just wasn't the same. Next, Devontae Smith, questionable with a hamstring injury. Like I've always said, fast guys with hamstring injuries, you just never know. And then next is Brian Robertson Jr. Sorry, Ryan, for another hit to your fantasy team. But he's questionable with an ankle injury. The report, and this is on ESPN, NFL report, says questionable ankle injury, and it is a wait-and-see type of injury. Don't know how formal that is or necessarily what that means. I guess, Ryan, you'll have to wait and see when they play next. So good luck with that. Next is Austin Eckler, questionable with concussion. This guy's kind of one of those, ex-Charger players that it's where hurt guys stay hurt. And it seems like in the, past 5-6 years, he always has an injury. He's always hurt, stuff like that. So, I don't even know the next running back to pick up for the almost got us canceled. The Commanders. But,
McNichols
sure. And then last one, he's not really a fantasy player, but Brandon Graham, he's tormented the Cowboys for years. It came out that he had a tricep injury, and he's done for the season. I would assume he tore it. That's tough for them. That's a guy that he hasn't missed many games, and he's always been a force on that D line for years. And it's just tough to see, him go out like that, even though he talked to the media and said, like, if there was a way to go out, I think he did it on a sack play or something like that. So it was like, he mentioned if there was a way to go out, it was to go out making a play. So it's just tough to see for him, but, props to him for a phenomenal career. And, like I said, awful to see, but great to see that way he doesn't, torment the Cowboys anymore. But, props to him. And so that kind of wraps up all my injury stuff. Do any of y'all have any questions about any of those or any of them you want to add?
The Analyst, do you have any comments you would like to make on that?
No, I'm just sick of my team getting injured and not having a full lineup in our fantasy league every week.
Hey, if there was a reward for Fantasy Manager of the Year, it's got to go to Ryan. Because he didn't have Christian McCaffrey. He didn't have somebody else. B-Rob's been in and out the last 6 weeks. Who else did you have hurt? Your quarterback wasn't it?
Well, we can start from the beginning. I had picked McCaffrey. He wasn't there. I've had Kenneth Walker, who's been in and out. I also had Chris Olave, who can't seem to catch a ball without getting concussions. I've also had, what's his name? Receiver, Rashee Rice. I had Rashee Rice.
Rashee Rice.
He went out.
He's a criminal anyway,
I had Devontae Adams for a time being. And for somehow, some way, I'm actually going to... It looks like I'm going to be in the playoffs, but my team is just... Like, I have no faith in my team. And if you saw my roster, you'd be like, how in the world are you only scoring 100 points? So now on my team, I've got Lamar, McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, and Darnell Mooney, and Brian Robinson. And I'm, like, struggling to even get in the playoffs right now.
Hey, you got them boys playing hard for you, dude. You got them playing hard for you. Next man up mentality.
They're not playing hard.
We're talking about a next man up manager. That's it. I mean, not to mention when you traded for Tyreek, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I have a tear in my wrist, and then then you
Tua
you
went
get
down.
Deontay Johnson. You're like, oh, I might have something here. Like this guy's kind of a sleeper. Kind of like the Adam Thielen from last year in the Panthers, and then they traded him to the Ravens, and he hasn't seen more than 10% of the snaps in 4 weeks. So it's just like, what?
And then the week I trade,
what are you gonna do?
The week I traded for DK Metcalf, the week after he gets that knee injury.
Oh yeah, the MCL.
Oh
sprains.
So
and the bye week. Yeah,
I'm like punching my way up the entire fantasy football season.
And I'll say this in non-confusing because we use a median, but I'll say this in non-confusing terms. I would say you're probably sitting at 5 and 7, 5 and 6 ish, right in between there, where it's like you're in the hunt, but like you're one of the top scorers for like 4 or 5 weeks.
I was one of the top scorers through like week 7, and now I'm like one of the bottom barrel.
Yeah, when you got McCaffrey back, everybody looked at that and was like, "Oh shit!" Like,
and I did
Ryan's
nothing.
back, and it just was like, how in the world is this team scoring 100? But other than that, I got no further comments on the injury list. If you want to go ahead and start with your DB.
Yeah, we'll get into the DB. Talking about DB list. It's actually Ryan's fancy thing. No, I'm kidding.
Literally.
Old man yelling at cloud.
Yeah, so we'll get into my old man yelling at cloud take right here. But my down bad list candidate is college football NIL. Okay. And I know everybody's like, oh, God, one of those things. But
Feinbaum.
Yeah, but, okay. And so I'll try to keep it as short as I can. But it obviously sparked with that quarterback leaving from LSU and going to Michigan for whatever ungodly amount of $10.5 million. Okay. Let's just paint a picture real quick. This is an 18-year-old leaving high school, going and getting paid $10.5 million. Okay. I don't care what anybody says, and y'all can attest to this, that each level you get to, the quality of athlete and player you have to play against is so much better than the quality you just left. I don't care what high school, you came from, and even what college, because they always talk about it, every year. Does the worst NFL team lose to Georgia or Alabama?
Brian's
no,
gonna have a lot to add to
they will never lose to Alabama, okay? And so that's the first take. The second take is how, and we have coaches that come to our practices and scout, talk about players, whatever, and I actually got into a pretty good conversation with a coach from one of the universities that came through talking about NIL and how, he was like, it has just ruined it because you have no accountability, you have no contractual things. The NIL is not what the NIL stands for, right? Because if we looked at that 10.5 million, that 10.5 million didn't come from his name, image, likeness. That 10.5 million. This is no indictment on the kid. I'm so happy they're getting paid.
He's innocent.
So happy they're getting paid. It should have been happening a long time ago. But that 10.5 million came from a University of Michigan booster sponsor, whatever you want to call it, fund. Okay, what in that is part of that kid's name, image, and likeness?
It's in Michigan.
Zero. Zero. Okay, when it first started, you saw people like Spencer Rattler at Cane's serving Caniac boxes to Jared when he was hungover on Saturday, mornings and whatnot, dude. That's what NIL is.
Bag, bro.
Yeah.
Put the fries in the bag. No.
Dude, he's over there 2 breads, 4 sauces, 6 fingers kind of thing. Yeah. And he's not wearing anything Oklahoma. He's not doing this, and that's what the NIL stood for. Is for a college or collegiate athlete to take their fame from where they played at and then go amongst the community and then get sponsorships and get paid for the name, image, and likeness. And that's where, and Nick Saban talked on it a lot, is he had to get out when he had to get out because he couldn't do that shit anymore. Because now you've got people chasing bags, and no, like I've said, nothing against them. They should do it. But if you're having a school pay for it, what's the point? What's the NIL there? You're just paying players. You're just paying and you're just paying players, and you can have any Joe Blow come out and be like, I'll give you $5 million to go to Michigan. And, it hasn't come out and been said, but we all saw what Dave Portnoy went on about all that with that Michigan player, is because you could have somebody that went to Michigan, and ultimately you could have a Tom Brady that's like, hey, bud, I'll pay you $15 million to go be the quarterback at Michigan. Well, of course they're going to go. But that's not name, image, and likeness. Now, if it was like, hey, I'm sponsored by TB12 or whatever company he owns, and then they get paid that way, so be it. That's how you do it. And so that's just my old man yelling at cloud spill. Like I said, I am not against the players getting paid whatsoever. They should be. The NCAA, as I've had someone call them terrorists before, the NCAA should be lit on fire for what they've done throughout, their whole career. But, that's just not what it's for. And, them governing everything else and then being like, yeah, do whatever with this. It's just like, what are we doing out here? Right. And so that's just my spill on it. Sorry it took a while, but, it gave me the red ass there. So I know everybody will probably, becoming a recent father, you could see I've turned into that old man, dad take whatever and all that. So yeah, so that was kind of my spill. I'm sure y'all probably have a lot of takes on that. If y'all want to go into it, feel free. If y'all want to give y'all's other DB lists and whatnot, but that's just mine.
Yeah. The analyst, I'll let you. Any
sweating
comments?
Over here.
Yeah.
No, I'll just give my elevator pitch on that. I've said this before on this podcast, coming from a school that was really small and took a lot of, this is before NIL, but it took a lot of the guys from big schools that had issues and stuff. I can get the recruitment standpoint from it, but what I don't understand is exactly what Jacob just said, the $10.5 million to one guy that could easily play 2 snaps or 3 snaps or even 3 games at your school and then be like, I don't want to play here anymore. There's no accountability for that whatsoever. And I think it says a lot that one of the greatest coaches of all time that had the most success at that level went into Congress and even talked about how he didn't want to do it anymore because it's not for the love of the game. It's about how much money these, 18-year-olds are getting thrown at them. I think that says a lot. So I think that's all I would say about it.
I think the angle that I appreciated with that part of the take was just kind of like what name, image, and likeness actually means. So it's like if you had let's say Tom Brady was like, hey, I'll let you. I just called the noble my Noble agent, who I am their sponsor kind of thing. I'm in their name, image, and likeness. And as a part of Michigan, I want to allow you to appear in Noble advertisements and get paid in their name, image, and likeness if you go to Michigan, kind of thing. And then Dave Portnoy calls and says, hey, I'll let you be a part of, Barstool Brands if you go to Michigan and be in like the representation, like that little tree that trickles down from alumni athletes and that part of that booster, and that what Michigan represents, and do the work in the community and say, yep, I think his last name's Underwood. I'm Mr. Underwood, and I am a Noble Barstool Brand Michigan quarterback, name, image, and likeness, and I get, earnings from that sort of thing. And I think that is the angle that NIL should be attacking, and not like, we're going to pay you a contract and here's $10.5 million. One, I think it's too much what they're getting. I mean, for an I've talked to parents. There's specifically one who goes to Anderson Shiro over here in Texas, and it's like they don't know how to handle half that stuff because they don't know how to handle an 18-year-old getting $700,000 off the rip. It's like, I guess that pays for college, but then like my son has all this money, like, what do we do? And so, is this wrong? Is there legal term? Like, it's going to take a lot of navigating, is all I'm trying to say. But I think the angle that the medical guy was working at was correct. And honestly, this is a mini Shatter the Script portion of that DB list because I took up issue with that Michigan ordeal. As like, of course he's going to go to Michigan. Of course he is. So, any other DB list candidates for the medical guy?
I mean, you could throw Florida State on there, but they've been on there all year, so I won't go into that. So,
Florida State, Seminoles.
Yeah. So, y'all go ahead.
The Analyst.
I have the Giants on there for their blatant mishandling of Saquon Barkley and having to cut Daniel Jones after giving him a extension. But the other one I have on there is the Houston Texans, and I've been saying this for a long time, and I've mentioned it multiple times on this podcast, that they are the little brother of Texas. And every time they get the chance, they lash out like a little brother, and it's exactly what I say every time. They beat the Cowboys. Congratulations, you beat the Cowboys that are completely dead. But then your social media team goes crazy for the next 5 days about how they beat Dallas and basically parading around Texas how they're the real Texans team, and you have Dalton Schultz doing it. Meanwhile, their team is completely falling apart, and we were basically their Super Bowl. And that's kind of what I've been saying for a long time about Texans fans, even since I was a child, is this is how they act. And it's like they're Dallas. All they care about is Dallas, and like they beat us, and we're like, bro, we don't care. Like I've never paid attention once. Yeah, I've never paid attention once to the Texans as a Cowboys fan. They've never mattered anything to me, in the sense of like how Dallas' season plays out or what happens. But like when they play us, it's like their little own Super Bowl. So maybe y'all should start focusing on how to get your quarterback back on track. But that's just my
14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions on the year.
Yeah,
so,
no bueno.
Yeah.
Maybe you should get them off the pods like we've been saying about our guys, but that's just us.
We do not care.
We do not care. Speaking of that, my DB list is a Pittsburgh Steeler. It is George Pickens. If you looked at this dude's film behind the scenes, which, by the way, great talented receiver, obviously, and he's really increased his repertoire and his numbers ever since Russell Wilson took over at quarterback. But that snow game, which, by the way, that Thursday night game was awesome. When the first half, clear green field, this is a good environment, NFC North matchup. Then the snow kicks in. It's like, all right, this turned into a dirtbag dog pound Browns team to even teams on. Snow is here. Welcome to winter kind of thing. And so that was awesome. But the DB list is George Pickens because on the Hail Mary, this dude is squabbling behind the cameraman, doing whatever. I don't even think anyone's gotten footage of what exactly he was doing, but I think he was beefing with a DB that essentially shoved him out of bounds all the way, took him out of the play, and then he got into it with like a fan on the first level. And so as the ball is being up in the air and tipped, and whatnot. He's back there, boxing and stuff, and it's just his antics throughout the season have just been. It's almost like we always talked about Will Levis being a clip farmer. It's almost like George Pickens is the ultimate clip farmer.
Yeah.
Like, interception, and then you just grab the dude around the head and RKO his ass into the turf. And the dude's hilarious. I mean, he's got an attitude for sure, and that needs to be adjusted from a coaching standpoint. I'm sure Mike Tomlin doesn't appreciate it sometimes. But, as a diva, what do you expect?
Just crash out fiend, bro.
Yeah.
Just whenever he gets the chance, you're just like, what is George Pickens doing?
George Pickens is crashing out once again. God damn.
Oh,
all right. Any other DB list candidates?
I don't have any.
That's all I got.
All right. Okay, Ryan, you want to make an audible. Do you want to go with your stat analysis first, and then we'll get into the Shatter the Script statement?
Sure, we can make it quick. All right, well, back on the stats. Usually, we do quarterback, running back, wide receiver. We're going to keep it that way. We'll make it short and sweet. Tuscaloosa Tua is back, apparently. 29 of 40, 317 yards and 4 touchdowns. Commanding 34-15 win over the Patriots. I'm not sure how big their playoffs are, but this is probably the friskiest team in the AFC. If they have a really good chance to play spoiler now that Tua's back and Tyreek Hill is out there and Waddle's finally making an appearance. Like I said, I'm not sure what the playoff picture looks for them, and I would have to imagine they'd have to win probably all of their games, but it's just like they're not going to go down without a fight. And like if you're the Bills fighting for seeding, or I don't know who they play, if it's the Ravens, whoever, this isn't a team I'd want to see. So dud of the week, I mentioned this earlier. Honestly, not a lot of actual QBs who aren't backups that did not play well, but I had to pick C.J. Stroud. He had not a bad stat line. He had 20 of 33, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. But I had to go with this one basically because he gave up that safety on his own. I don't know if y'all saw that
I heard
play
it was
at the end
Dan
of the game.
Orlovsky-esque.
Yeah, he just basically ran out of the pocket and got sacked when he basically ran on the backside of the goal line. We've talked about it, and they are in straight struggle mode down the stretch. And this one stood out to me given that they lost to the Titans too.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad, especially how bad the Titans have been this year. I just think they're on the brink of being a first-round exit. I just don't think they're. Everybody had high expectations, and clearly they're doing something else. So running back of the week, extremely easy pick. This was so easy. Saquon Barkley,
Let's go.
26 attempts, 255 yards on the ground, and 2 touchdowns. 4 receptions, 47 yards. I mean, he's just having a hell of a year, and there is a case to have him be the MVP, given there is no clear-cut quarterback candidate at the moment. So since that's what they like to do when they give out these MVP awards, it's very arguable that it's just a quarterback award. He's clearly gotten the juice back since he left the Giants. He had some down years on the Giants, or years where he just didn't show out as good as he's always been, but him being on the Eagles and that system with weapons and a pretty decent offensive line, he's clearly making the most of it. And as for my dud of the week, I had Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he only had 11 attempts and 31 yards. Granted, this team is likely in the injury death zone right now. I mean, their entire team, I feel like, is either injured or playing injured. And they didn't have Purdy in this game, but they needed him to help carry the boats here against the Packers. And I mean, if you watch that game, he was a complete non-factor. He didn't do anything in that game to impress or even break a run. It was just he struggled just like the rest of his team. So, wide out of the week. I picked 2 here, and then I picked 2 to make a case. You had Jordan Addison at 8 receptions, 162 yards, and a tutty, and Waddle at 8 receptions, 144 yards, and a touchdown as well. So huge game for both of them, but the reason I picked both of them is because they're wideout 2s on their team. Waddle's playing behind Tyreek Hill, and Addison's playing behind Justin Jefferson, who's, probably the 2 arguably top 5 receivers in the NFL right now. But I think it's probably an argument that both of these guys, if drafted to other teams, could be a wideout one on like a small caliber team, named like the Panthers, the Saints, some team like that where they could use a guy. Waddle and Addison could easily go play and be a one in those situations. As for a dud of the week, I picked DK Metcalf, 4 receptions, 59 yards. Honestly, could have gone with a couple guys here like Marvin Harrison Jr., Neighbors without a quarterback. That's why I didn't pick him. But it just seems very clear that there's a case to be made that JSN could be taking over this wideout room. And at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if, the weird and like right after the trade deadline, you got that notification that DK Metcalf wasn't traded, and you're like, what? Why would he be traded?
Yeah.
But Schefter reported that they couldn't deal with DK Metcalf and they'll move on, and I'm like, well, nobody knew he was even getting looked at to be traded. But all that to say, I wouldn't be shocked if like in the off season they got rid of DK Metcalf. It kind of seems like they're trying to move in an opposite direction. And maybe that seems like a team to me, like the Seahawks are going to be a team where they kind of readjust in the offseason. I wouldn't be shocked if they went and got a quarterback or something, dealt DK for some picks. Because, they're not a terrible team. But you can just tell they need a reset in some areas. So
yeah, I would agree.
I went with DK for that, that instance. It seems like JSN is probably going to end up overtaking that area. So that was quick, short, off the hip pistol fire back in the holster. I don't know if you had any comments on any of those.
No, mine's only on the Seahawks. I had no idea that Metcalf was in talks to get dealt. But at the same time, I think you're 100% correct because right now Geno, I like the ain't rope back ordeal. But the last 2 seasons after that, it's just been like they need more in order to be contenders. They need that difference maker, and he's at 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions currently. And it's just that's not going to work. And I believe that's his stat line. I looked at it earlier today, I think. But
I'd say my duds of the week would be basically any San Francisco 49 receiver. I don't know if y'all watched any of that game, but Deebo Samuel, after smacking his kicker in the face, proceeds to, have like 4 drops, and then not a very good game. And then another one was the Ricky Pearsall. He goes from like 1 week of having like 8 targets, 100+ yard a game, and a touchdown. And then the last 2 weeks in which I've started him, he's had like 2 targets. So that's super cool. And so those were my duds because I watched some of that game, and 49ers, they're in between a rock and hard place right now.
Yeah, yes, I didn't pick any of the receivers because Brandon Allen was playing quarterback. But
oh yeah, true.
It could end up after this next week. Dallas plays the Giants, and I don't remember who the 49ers play. Or they play the Bills. That the 49ers and the Bills, that the
49ers and the Cowboys.
The 49ers and the Cowboys will have the same record at 5-7.
Yikes.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I think it's 2 different cases, though. The Cowboys were just built to fall apart, but the Niners, I think, is more that they've been, like I said, injured to all hell. I don't think they've ever had a full roster to go out. So
Cowboys built with that untreated lumber, man. It just fire hard.
They weren't built for tough, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Good Lord. Okay. All right, well, let's get into our Shatter the Script, and then we will, and that includes the Texas A&M game and who is your NFL MVP through November, as well as our Thanksgiving game day predictions. So, to start off, we'll kind of do a little intro about this with the Texas and Texas A&M game. I've been leading up to this matchup all year. If you've been paying attention to the Shatter the Script episode, and as well as the Stats and Scars and parts of our winners and losers and whatnot and predictions, this game I have talked about being the biggest game of the decade, and the SEC kind of all falls upon this matchup, especially as A&M and Texas's seasons have progressed. There's still a large, even outside of the Auburn loss, there's still a major factor to be played in this game in terms of how it trickles down to the rest of the SEC. If Texas A&M wins this game, they have clinched an SEC championship appearance with Georgia. If Texas wins this game, they're in the SEC championship with Georgia as well. So, and possibly when A&M win, might put them back into the playoff talks. Texas would probably stay in. This is a huge game, and there have been, discussions with the crowd. Pulling tickets. Certain frats have pulled, close to 1,000 from what I've heard. Tickets from Texas to Texas A&M to take all those people and put them in the same place. Let me get one thing straight. Kyle Field hosting the Texas Longhorns is not a fucking concert. It is a home game. That stadium should be packed out full maroon. It is not for you frat guys to sit out there and sniff and snort cocaine after and have a bigger party and then get in a bunch of fucking fights at Northgate. I'm pissed about this because this is not what college football is about. And I called it since September that this crap was going to go down. Or we're going to bring our girlfriends and boyfriends from Texas to come down to the game. Oh, it's going to be cool. No, it should be complete maroon domination in that stadium. However, that's an outside source. I just had to throw that in there. That's not the way you do things. You think, it's stupid.
Hey, chill out, Brian Kelly.
Well,
here we are again.
Here we are again. No, but what's crazy is it's like it happened to be the frat guys that do it, and I'm like, do you guys not understand? Like, bragging rights to be like the best environment in college football is Kyle Field. Why would you screw that up with adding thousands of Texas people? It just think. But all right. Keys to success and predictions. Here's a little kind of intro into this game as well. The first meeting, the two teams started playing in 1894. Texas winning that game 38-0. Eesh. I think that was back when we were all farmers. And the series...
it's still, just a bunch of agriculturalists and mechanics. That's all it was.
Exactly, yeah. We were the ones making the field. And that, yeah.
They just asked y'all to come play.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the 12th man kind of started, I guess, if you want to go to the history of the Texas A&M. But, the series total all time, Texas Longhorns lead this one 36 and 37 to 5. So we have 5 ties, possibly a 6th one incoming. No, but I think this is going to be an outstanding game. Texas, like I mentioned, sitting at 10-1, 6-1 in the SEC. A&M at 8-3, at 5-2 in the SEC. At Kyle Field, College game day is going to be here. A&M clinches the SEC championship with win. Texas is favored by 6 points, and Georgia has already clinched. So, with all that being said, let's kind of get into your keys to success of this game. We'll start with the Analyst. Going into this game, what do you find to be your key players, your key attributes from each team in order for them to win this ball game in what is supposed to be a hostile environment?
I think it just comes down to quarterback play on both sides. I think Reed's got to figure out how to throw the ball a little bit better. I don't think that the running game for A&M is that much of an issue. I think their receivers can sometimes be an issue, but you need Reed to come out and play better, period. And then for the question mark, I think for UT is almost the exact same thing with Ewers. He's just got to be better in the terms of, or he's got to play to the expectation that he was given at the beginning of the year. And especially in a hostile environment, Georgia gave him a run basically ran through them when they played Texas, and A&M's kind of had some up and downs that they need to overcome. So I'd really just think that A&M's defense is fine. It's just going to come down to how Reed handles this game and how Ewers handles this game.
Yeah. The medical guy, your analysis heading into this one.
Yeah, I would agree with Ryan. I think it's going to be more of Reed using his feet than his arm. And I just think that he's a better runner than thrower. He's a better playmaker and improviser than anything. I think it's going to come down to me, I think it's going to come down to A&M's defense, depending on if they stay in this game or not. Their defense is very good. It can be very good. Obviously, what happened in the Auburn Bowl, I don't think is a testament to what this team is. And so I think, arguably enough, this is kind of like the opposite of what A&M and Texas used to be, where it used to be Big 12 defense and offense all over the place and whatnot. I think this is going to be a defensive game, and I really think this. Funny enough, I think this game is going to kind of go like the Cowboys and Commanders game did this past week, where there's not going to be much scoring, there's not going to be much movement, it's going to be kind of boring, and then all of a sudden the fourth quarter is going to come around, and you're going to be like, how did this game end up like this? How did this even get close to the over? Everybody's going to be sweating their bets and whatnot. But I really do think that both these teams are going to feel each other out for probably the first half, and they're going to go into that first half, and it's going to be like 10-7 or something stupid like that. And then third quarter, you'll see a switch in momentum, and then fourth quarter, it's going to be like, all right, we're going to open up a playbook, and defense isn't going to exist, and then all of a sudden, you're like, what the hell? But I think A&M's defense is going to be a big key for them, and I'm in total agreement with Ryan on Quinn Ewers. I really cannot get a good gauge on if he is a decent quarterback or not, because sometimes he, looks like Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball around and swinging it, and then sometimes he looks like, and not an indictment on Colt McCoy, but if you watch those old Texas teams, the dude was 78% passing, 80% passing, but he threw it was screens, and it was screens, slants, stops, and you had all these dudes out there just making people miss. And so I really don't know if he's just that game changer of a quarterback, and that's what he would need to do for this team to succeed.
Yeah, I think those are good points, and I wanted to put that key of emphasis on quarterback play. And I think Ewers, especially, they wanted to run with this Arch Manning narrative in that Georgia game so badly. The media wanted that with all their hearts, and Ewers has given a lot to this organization. As one of the few quarterbacks that have remained loyal to his college program. And he's going to come into this game with a chip on his shoulder for sure, and something to prove, because he wants to another chance at that college football playoff atmosphere that that they so badly missed in that Washington game last year in the top four. So I think Ewers is going to be at his best. I think he's going to be that kind of that 200 to 220 passing yard category. Yeah. I do think he makes a mistake. I think the pass rush for Texas A&M, Nick Scorton and Stewart are going to be first round, second round draft picks in the NFL that are going to cause a lot of tantrum within this Texas offense, and it's going to cause quick throws, a lot of check downs, especially like the medical guy mentioned in that first half. The offense is just going to be stalling and stalling, not stalling, but but anyway, like I think the running game, I don't think Texas is going to be able to run the ball like they want to run the ball against this A&M offense. But in that second half, those passing lanes are going to open, because as you saw in the Auburn game, that the Texas A&M DBs have shown that they can give up those yardages regardless of who the quarterback is. So that's going to be something to watch in terms of Texas Longhorn offensive production. Another thing too, with flipping over to the A&M side, is Marcel Reed. Those freshman mistakes. I know y'all kind of already hit on. He's obviously a better runner than he is a passer. But when you have time to scout Marcel Reed, especially him being as young as he is in this platform, or in this on this level, is that they've kind of found a way to limit and put a spy on him, those runs. You don't see those 20-plus yarders anymore like you saw earlier in the year. You kind of see 7 to 8, 3 to 5 on a scramble, because they've watched him, they've studied him, and they know he has a tendency to fall off that first read and maybe just start scrambling. But I think a big factor in the offensive production for Texas A&M is if that running game it gets going. And I do love the Texas A&M offensive line in this one. If Le'Veon Moss returns, I haven't seen any reports on what the status of him is on that. But if he returns and you have him and Amari Daniels 1-2 back, I think eventually that running game is going to be extremely vital for the offensive production, and you'll see Marcel Reed be a little bit more comfortable on play action, on RPOs and whatnot. With that being said, it all depends on the quarterback play. for both sides. I think Ewers is a little banged up, checking out that ankle. Marcel Reed can't make those fresh mistakes throwing interceptions in the red zone. That being said, what are our predictions heading into this game? I know it's probably the most impossible part, but like I mentioned before, Texas is favored at 6 points heading into this one. Night game in the SEC. Medical guy, what are your predictions for this game?
Like I said, I think this is going to be a really close game, and then I think it's going to end up a close game, but I think it's going to be a low-scoring game for the majority of the game, and then all hell is going to break loose. I know you're probably going to think University of Texas bias with my prediction, but I do think I think it could go either way. To be honest, like I said, I could see A&M winning this definitely. Especially if they pressure Ewers. It's shown that like he can't move very well. Two, when they can get some interior pressure on the defensive line, he can struggle. Especially moving and trying to get the ball down the field. And I think A&M's defense is good enough to do it. It's just, if they do it. But I think University of Texas, I think they pull out a gutsy win. It's going to be 28-25. Like I said, it could be like 13-10 going into the fourth quarter, and then all of a sudden, it's just going to go berserk. But I've got UT winning 28-25. Like I said, not trying to pull any bias because I could easily see it flip-flop the other way.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about bias, unfortunately your host is an A&M fan, so I have to try and remove that from my take every week.
Yeah.
Right,
I definitely think 6.5 is way too much, though.
Yeah,
especially being a rivalry game that just came back alive after 12 years. God.
It's tough. I'm telling you, I've been thinking about it, for probably 5-6 weeks. Just like Mike Elko, I guess.
I think I'm going to go A&M 27-26.
Damn. Any reasons why?
I just think them being at home, from what I've seen, I think A&M's a little bit more battle-tested.
Yeah.
On top of that, I just think that Texas might be riding a little high right now, and A&M just got punched in the mouth and is going to be pissed off. So that's kind of the short and sweet version.
Yeah, and I think most importantly, I think that A&M is backed into a corner here, and they've been on a downhill slope the last two SEC matchups on games that they were favored to win, and it just didn't work out in that such a way. And I think with that being said, historically this season, with night game SEC, the home team has done a fabulous job historically this year. And we've seen that in multiple different occasions. So, like I said, I am a Texas A&M Aggie guy. I want to try and remove bias from my pick. But how everything could be played out, I really think this is going to be a narrow victory for Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And I don't – trust me, and you're my brother. You know that my confidence in a team like Texas A&M is never really that high. It wasn't high going into the season. It wasn't high going into Auburn. At 10:30 a.m., I said, upset alert, A&M today. And they lost. I just I feel like I know my teams. So narrow victory. I'm calling it like 26-23 Texas A&M game-winning field goal in this one. And I really think the defensive front for Texas A&M gets after Quinn Ewers and makes some really clutch sacks, maybe a strip fumble, get some defensive touchdowns in there. Excuse me. But without bias, I just think back against a corner, night game SEC, historically it's gone towards the home team. I think A&M pulls out this win. I really do. And somebody asked me if I would bet $100 on it. I would be willing to do that. I don't know.
I don't know.
I'd be willing to burn for that and just be like, well, you know what? When I feel something, I'll attack it. But if I'm wrong, I'll tell you I'm wrong. So we'll see on Sunday. But I'm excited for this matchup. Okay. Let's conclude this episode with who was our NFL MVP through November, and then we'll do some rapid predictions for Thanksgiving Day. So I'll start with mine. I haven't started with any of these yet. MVP through November in the NFL. I kind of was looking through it, and I had a couple names on there, and it pains me to freaking say it. Obviously, I want to let somebody else talk about the other player, but Lamar Jackson, 27 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Me and my buddy were going through it the other day. Of his 3 interceptions, all 3 have been tipped or stolen from out of the air. So almost, if you look at it on whose fault was it or those interceptions, it's almost like Lamar should have 27 touchdowns, 0 picks. And, of course, he's dropped a couple games he shouldn't have dropped, like the Pittsburgh game and a game early on in the season and whatnot. But I don't want to say that because last year he didn't deserve the MVP. This year it looks like he does deserve the MVP. So long-term success, you're going to say, oh, this is MV3. This is his 3rd MVP that he's gotten. This is incredible. And then you're like, yeah, like the second one was fraudulent. But then again, it's back-to-back. It's a 2-time MVP, dual-threat quarterback. So I'm not trying to hate on it. I'm just saying this year, it's as a quarterback, if you're going to choose a quarterback for MVP, I think it's Lamar. But I do think Josh Allen has an argument for sure. I think he needs to catch up on some touchdowns. But in terms of quality wins, playing effective, I think Josh Allen has an argument, but I think Lamar leads that in the quarterback front. The medical guy, I'll let you go with your NFL MVP through November.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is going to be Lamar, and I think going with this award is obviously record takes a lot of place into it. If record didn't control the narrative so much, I think mine would be Joe Burrow. As you could see, I mean, he's got 27 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He is the only reason that team has won any game. And it's kind of like my take with C.J. Stroud last year is that, if those weren't their quarterbacks, where would they be? And you can easily look at this team and be like, the only reason this team is competitive is because of Joe Burrow. Now, I have another Shatter the Script take with that, but we won't get it into it. But since records matter, I mean, it's obviously cliche. It's got to be Lamar. I know Saquon Barkley is playing really well, but he's ahead of Derrick Henry by like 40 yards, and no one's considering Derrick Henry in the MVP race. So it's really hard for me to consider Saquon Barkley, even though Saquon is doing just unreal stuff. And It's honestly not awesome to watch him succeed now that he's out of just such a brutal organization that didn't help him out whatsoever. And seeing a guy that is a generational back to being a generational back. But, it's got to be Lamar Jackson right now.
Yeah. The Analyst.
Yeah, I like the Burrow take too.
I do as well.
I think I've said this to Jared a couple times. It reminds me of 2020 Dak when he was like bailing out, or he was balling out before his leg injury. It was basically you had to score 40 points to win games. Burrow's like in the exact same scenario. It's just their deficit is too big to make the playoffs. They always start off slow and figure out the way through it, and they can't do it this year. I think this is the verge of seeing this team crumble, especially because they probably are going to lose T. Higgins as well. But in terms of MVP, Lamar I think is your obvious pick right now. Last year he should not have won the award. This year it's pretty convincing that he should. But I think another one that's kind of flying under the radar that's not named Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen's another one, but Jared Goff is another one that I think you could make a case here that Jared Goff, if you're talking in terms of winning with an efficient QB, Jared Goff has been very efficient, like Lamar and Josh Allen, and he's been nearly perfect outside of the Texans game. So I think Jared Goff is another one you could throw in there, but just right now, I think knowing the NFL, they're going to give it to Lamar. So
yeah. And if they had a gutsiest MVP, I'd have to go Baker Mayfield. That was another one I wrote on here, just because like the injuries has been to his team, just some of the plays he makes, and obviously he's not the craziest athlete on the field, and he is just like willing his team into like close games.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I had to add one to that play, if you want to talk about the most efficient, quarterback with the team for the MVP, I would put Justin Herbert in that category.
Oh yeah.
13 touchdowns, 1 interception last night. that game, the score, it was 7 points, but Quentin Johnson still dropped passes.
Yikes!
He's got nobody really. I mean, he doesn't have a star tight end. He doesn't have a star receiver besides McConkey. McConkey's coming in, but man, Herbert has been fun to watch, and he's happy. Like the dude actually looks like he's having fun out there. So, he used to average 40 attempts a game.
Yeah,
just
when he throws the ball, like it's similar like a Josh Allen thing. It's like you just see some of those passes where he's like, "Yep, I'm uncorking this one," and it's just so fluid, and you're like, "Nice." And then Quentin Johnson drops it, and you're like, "Not nice."
Not nice. All right, let's wrap this puppy up with some quick Thanksgiving predictions. Granted, we're focusing on the Thanksgiving games. There's definitely better ones out there, but. Since seeing that it is Thanksgiving week, we figured it'd probably be most appropriate to do Thanksgiving predictions. We got 3 games on the slate. Starting off first is the NFC North matchup between the 4-7 Chicago Bears visiting the Detroit Lions at 10-1 at Ford Field. 11:30 a.m. We've got Detroit as a 10-point favorite. The Analyst, can I start with you on this one for this prediction of the Bears and Lions?
I think it's a beatdown. I think the Lions. I say it's a beatdown. I think they win by 14. I think they win by 2 touchdowns. I think the score is going to be like 31-17 or 31-14 or something like that. I just think the Bears are kind of all over the place, and the Lions are, like we've been talking about, are firing on all cylinders. So I think you're going to see that, especially this being a home game for the Lions. I think it'll be not close for a lot of the game.
I like it. The medical guy?
I have the same exact prediction, 31-17. I think the Bears have kind of been riding that new coach, new offensive coordinator vibe and whatnot, and I think it's going to kind of plummet down. And, it's 31-17, but I'm sure one of those is going to be like a backdoor touchdown, hopefully to DJ Moore. And so I think it's going to be a beatdown.
Yeah. I'm going 38-21 Detroit. I think that Ben Johnson gets in his bag, and they tend to take these rivalry games a little bit personal, and they've performed well in all of them. So I think they'll kind of embarrass that Chicago Bears unit, and I think that backdoor touchdown, like you mentioned, is going to come where it's like 38-14, and then they get 21.
Yeah.
So a lot like we saw in the Thursday night, the Monday night game between the Rams and the Eagles.
Yeah.
Okay. Next on the list. Giants 2-9 with DeVito at quarterback versus Dallas Cowboys at 4-7 with Cooper Rush at quarterback at 3:30 p.m. Dallas is favored by 4 points. We'll start with the medical guy and work our way around.
Yeah, this is a floater of a game, but I actually have Dallas winning this 17-10.
That's a good score.
I think the worst thing you can do is if they play Drew Lock, I think the Giants would win this game. The Cowboys' defense has actually looked better since they just put everybody in the box and blitz everybody, which, they go full like Madden when you play your little brother or cousin or whatever, you just blitz everybody. And so they've been doing that, and it's been successful. And then I'm just going to assume they're just going to throw it to CeeDee Lamb like 14 times, 15 times this game and whatnot. And I think it's going to be, this might be one where, we're all eating and whatnot and just kind of looking like, oh, nice, Dallas is playing, and then go back to doing whatever we're doing. So I got 17-10 Dallas victory.
I like it. The Analyst.
Yeah, I have on mine, this is when you take your afternoon nap after you fill your face with Thanksgiving food. So I think the Cowboys win this game as well. I think it's going to be like 21-10 or 17-10, something along the lines of that. But this is definitely a game that you don't want to sit down and watch. Just go get your second plate of food or take your afternoon, food, come and nap.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got 23-13 Dallas. I think Dallas gets some sort of a defensive turnover, which gets them into the red zone or possibly a touchdown, perhaps maybe a special teams touchdown. As we know, if you watch any Cooper Rush game, he is always getting some sort of defensive touchdown if they win. So if we're predicting a Dallas Cowboys win, like we all are, then there will be a defensive or special teams touchdown. You betcha.
Yeah, I think in our last 3 games, Camonte Turpin leads us in touchdowns.
Yeah, where was he? Or where was he? That's all I got to say. Well, he had a good game with Pittsburgh Steelers, but all right. Well, that wraps up our episode. I appreciate you guys joining. We kind of got it all knocked out in one big mega episode with.
We got the Dolphins Packers.
That is right. Okay. Well, I'm just such in a rush to get out of here. I've got nowhere to be, but apparently I want to end the episode. I'll always do this. Dolphins at 5-6. Ryan was talking about how they had to win out, and they possibly could be a dog with a bone, essentially. Dolphins 5-6 visiting the 8-3 Packers at Lambeau Field. This is your night game, 7:20 p.m. Green Bay is favored 3.5. This should be a fun one. Maybe possibly get some snow again. But I'll let the analysts lead this one off, and then we'll trickle our way around.
I think this one's interesting. Depending on how cold it is up in Green Bay, I think the Dolphins could pull off an upset here. I've already said they're kind of one of the friskiest teams in the NFL or on the AFC side, and this is kind of a game where if the Packers aren't on their shit, then the Dolphins could upset them. So that was my prediction. I'm going to go the Dolphins 24, the Packers 21.
God dang it, nice. Ryan. We just on a frequency, man.
I was about to say I'm in my bag right now.
Yeah.
Two fathers.
Yeah. So I guess I'll leave it at that. I literally have the same exact points as Ryan. I have this is depending on the weather, and Dolphins 24-21. Exact thing I have written down.
Bam.
Yeah, we don't even need Jared. Let's go.
You can't write that up. My prediction 24-21. No. So I know this is going to be cold. It's going to be windy. I think I see on the sleeper app here that it's going to be pretty damn windy. I think with that being said, I'm going to take the stronger arm in this one and the better coach. I'm going to take the Packers winning this one 20-16 pretty comfortably. I think they command the lead most of the game. But I like Jordan Love in this one. I can see an upset if the like you said, depends on the weather. I can see the Dolphins winning this game comfortably in a way, but I really do like the Packers in this one in a hostile weather environment. So playing outdoors in the winter, I like the Packers. They belong in that arena. So okay, that is it. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't see anything else on the outline.
That's my fault. I always do that. I always leave at least one thing per episode. But yeah, all right. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, if you are a first-time listener, you can find us at Shatter the Script on all platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, the whole ordeal. At Shatter the Script, you can find us on all of those platforms for content. We'll be releasing clips throughout the week and throughout your holiday. Be safe on those Black Friday shopping adventures, especially for the youngins. So. Appreciate you guys joining. I know we're going to do this big 90-minute episode all in one and just kind of bag it all so that we can enjoy the rest of our weekend and know that the content is safe and secure. So, all right. Next weekend, we'll be back at it with more football to cover and a lot more answers in college football heading into Army-Navy week, I believe. So that'll be exciting. Cool. All right, boys. Appreciate it. And we will see y'all next week. Have a happy Thanksgiving.